Shortly before my father passed away, he shared a story with me, one he had kept secret for most of his life. It happened back in the late 1960s during his service in Vietnam. He was part of a small team sent deep into the jungle to plant seismic sensors along enemy trails. There were only 2 Americans and 5 South Vietnamese CIDG fighters. On the second day of the mission, my dad and 2 of the fighters broke off from the main group to observe a trail intersection, the kind of place enemy soldiers often pass through. The jungle was eerily calm that day. Aside from the occasional bird call and the buzz of insects, there was only silence. For hours, they lay hidden in the underbrush, waiting and watching. Eventually, they began debating whether to push farther or head back to rejoin the others. Before making the call to move, my dad scanned the trail one last time. And that's when something impossible happened. Lying near the trail, just shy of the intersection, was a man, but not an enemy soldier, not even someone from his time. It was a light-skinned black Union cavalry soldier, dressed in full 19th century battle gear. He wore 2 pistols on his belt, a Spencer rifle, and a short curved war club at his hip. Frozen, my dad stared at the figure, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The soldier calmly met his gaze and smiled. Then, slowly, the soldier brought a finger to his lips in a clear gesture. "Stay quiet." After that, he motioned for my father to back away from the trail. Trusting the warning, my dad signaled his men to stay down and slipped back into the jungle. At the same time, the mysterious soldier disappeared into the brush on the other side. Less than 10 seconds later, an entire unit of North Vietnamese army soldiers, at least 70 or 80 of them, heavily armed with automatic rifles, machine guns, and rocket launchers, passed through the intersection just 30 feet away. "They would have wiped us out," my dad told me, shaking his head. "We wouldn't have stood a chance." As soon as the enemy was gone, my dad and his team retreated as quietly and quickly as possible, eventually regrouping with the rest of their patrol. He reported the enemy's sighting but never said a word about the strange soldier. Not to his commanders, not to his friends. Years later, on her deathbed in the 1970s, my dad told his grandmother about what he'd seen. Without opening her eyes, she simply smiled and said, "You saw old Red Tom." Red Tom was my great-great-grandfather. A half-black, half-Creek free man, he had been a Union Army scout during the Civil War and later served in the U.S. cavalry in the American West. He was known for charging into battle with 2 pistols, a Spencer rifle, and a war club, exactly like the man my father saw in the jungle that day. My dad died without ever finding an explanation. And honestly, I don't have one either. But I do know this. Sometimes the past isn't as far away as we think. And sometimes our ancestors are still watching over us, even on the other side of the world in the middle of a war.